Just dive right in. Follow my lead.
Yeah.
What is this called? I can't remember. Metro.
Kids when we fell in love, not knowing what it was. I will not give you up this time. Darling, just kiss me slow. Your heart is all I own, and in your eyes, you're holding mine. Baby, I'm listening to talk.
Testing for WebEx. Testing for WebEx. WebEx. Testing. Email address because I don't have that list electronically. He is not. He's on vacation. We're doing a test. He is not here. He's on vacation. So he sent me the. I need, if he sends me his email address, I can forward it. Huh? Yeah, yeah. Hmm? Long one. Okay. We're doing testing for the, you know, the gong sound that didn't work last night. Trying to get that, yeah. But we have a little alarm clock downstairs I should have brought. For when we did the budget out in the public, oh, it's big numbers. It could have sat right there. I should have used it. Yeah, you can sit anywhere you want to. Ah, yeah, there's someone already sitting over there too, so don't sit in the third one, but otherwise. Hook you all up with a group me? I'd have to have all your phone, yeah, that's not gonna happen. And have a seat.
I was figured I'd be in the audience. I'm not actually on.
Sit wherever you want. Really can.
Hey.
Doing well?
Jason, it's going very well. Yeah, I know you've been a busy man. How are things going with,
Same as you.
your son must be, what, 18 now? Or 17?
Yes.
Yeah, my son Nate is.
They're juniors.
I
We're
often tell
starting to
people
look
we
at colleges
coached,
there. No, that's right. That's right. So-
I was like, yeah, our sons were the two worst players on the team.
Well, we coached. Did you, so have y'all looked at colleges at all?
Yeah, well, my daughter's a senior, so I should have figured. My son's. So he's
I got
just,
been there 8th and 6th.
okay, so my daughter's going to UNC Chapel Hill next year, so she did look at a lot of schools. That's where I went, so she kind of decided to follow in dad's footsteps. And so he's looking around. I think, right now he's kind of thinking like his sister big state schools, Georgia.
Yeah. We just started looking. Got a lot of friends.
Alabama's got very hot. I heard they were at Emmanuel High School thing last night. My son.
I heard that.
Is that again? They were there, and they were saying they're 60% out of state students now at Alabama. The citizens of Alabama are going to
Bunch
start.
of kids in Owl Creek who go
Uh-huh.
back.
Oh yeah,
That's what they wasn't before.
it's become all the rage.
Seems like the two in the East End. Those.
Yeah, big football schools. The Greek system is huge there.
I don't know. I kind of like where I'm going.
Would you have a connection to Xavier?
Other than a lot of friends have kids go there.
Yeah.
Yeah, both their sons go there. I know about 15.
That's cool.
It's a place that a lot of Catholic families, because it's Catholic, it's close.
Yeah. I feel bad for Bellarmine. They're losing all the Catholic kids. Right. They're all going to Xavier and Notre Dame. Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know
I
that.
thought it would be, think of the states.
Yeah. It doesn't have Saint in front of it.
Yeah, right, in St. Louis, they Catholic school. I don't know them. Could be there long.
Yes, I will. Yeah, 10. Yeah, looking forward to that.
A lot of things. Part of one of the. 900.
Gubernatorial Republican primary voters.
It's the,
Yeah.
and they, 71% think that Kentucky, I don't where it ought to be on.
Yeah.
So we got voters.
Right.
saying, let's send you.
Yeah.
You don't touch it, go away.
So it's what percent? So it's 71.
71 said the right, but they need to be.
Got it.
18 said too harsh.
I see. Okay, so it's 89%. Okay, well, yeah, that does create some constraints. Yeah,
There's a lot of people.
I like her.
There's a lot of people who are not. So.
Where you go?
Section. We got to.
Yeah.
So to the extent we want to go. A little off of that standalone. Garrett, blah, blah, blah. Statute that something brand new, it's easy as hell.
Right. You're just
That's
tightening,
good. We're
just
using
tweaking
precedent.
something.
We're
Yeah.
using precedent. There's a statute that says when you go to a therapist, when you cross some line, I don't know what it is, but all the therapists and counselors know. And cross some line and they think that you're a danger to yourself, then they have a responsibility to tell the law enforcement. Why isn't that also a hold on? It seems like just a build on precedent. Well, anyway, that kind of stuff.
Is there any appetite to sort of subject, I know there could be challenges for special legislation, but like just carving out exceptions just for little.
We'll talk about that tomorrow. You guys need to push for that. And I also think if you guys reach for things that we know we can't grasp, that can still maybe increase our grasp. We need to get to where you need to go.
Right.
You still got to be pushing. And plus that's political game.
Yeah.
I guess. I don't see home coming in play here. Just don't see it possible. We'll see.
How's it going?
Maybe we'll have a conversation and see what we can do.
Cool. Well, looking forward to
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. So.
You having a good time?
No. Right after session-
Too much work, nights and weekends?
right after session-
Why is that? Why is
Because
that the
it's
worst?
catch up on practice time. I was in court like.
So they cut you a lot of slack during the session and all of a sudden it's like, all right, now do it, now try 5Ks.
Good.
Good.
They are, right?
That- And they should have an expectation.
Right,
Is I got.
right. Yeah, I feel your
It makes
pain.
it worry, I don't get a breath. Until like June. So
Well, public service.
that's it, man.
That's why they call it public service.
He's a great guy. Oh, such a good guy. It's the things done, I understand. Yeah. Good.
Sure, $390,000 parking project. Sweet. I ain't got the bill yet. They looked over there 4 or 5 times and it held water for 2 days, so.
Okay, good. We had a leak when we first. Oh.
Your little one,
Big one.
I was putting the ladder in.
What happened it wasn't the lighter. It was the, connection. I need to, something was wrong.
Main drain.
But that should have They should, you know.
You know,
plumbers
it's
do a-
the,
Plumbers do a, you know, they do a stress test. Before they even do that. That should have been done before they put the line.
he is down. It's sorry. And it's,
Hey, how's it going, Scott?
she's on the back.
Good to see you. I saw you at the vigil. You had like a front row seat. I saw you get up and escort somebody out.
Second.
Barbara.
They wanna ride it.
David, Barbara.
I was up.
City.
So you've done it.
But you have to go. Showing. Absolutely.
Yeah, Paul,
That's Vegas Hall.
Look at the reason. Turns out we've got two good mutual friends, Barry's.
Yes.
Son, Jacob.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So yeah. Okay, so I knew that. So what's your connection? Know that.
So we had this
Okay, so you guys see him. Okay, I love.
He's a big fan of yours.
I have lunch with Jay. Yeah, August Moon. He like I know what his order is too. Yeah, he can still put it down. Big tone too much. Yeah. He's
Always think about you.
He's still doing volunteering. I think you got this pretty well. So that's really cool. I didn't know.
Yeah,
We're back
oh,
there.
yeah.
That's wild. I'm surprised that they have such a record.
Okay, guess what we do?
Very proud.
They said, Jumped up a little bit on the way too.
I'll look in.
We're gonna have to show.
Okay, you better.
Okay, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. We can start by taking roll.
Representative Jason Nemus,
Here.
Co-Chair Earl Jones, Senator Gerald Neal, Senator Julie Rocky Adams,
Here.
Senator Mike Nemus, Representative Ken Fleming, Representative Pamela Stevenson, Councilmember Piagentini, Councilmember Ja'Cory Arthur,
Present.
Councilmember Cindy Fowler, Mary Ann Butler,
Present.
Shelby Williams Somerville,
Present.
Scott Schoenberger,
Present.
Mayor Bonnie Jung, Chief Sean Dreisbeck. On the.
John, I think you're on mute. And so, and he's here.
Um,
All right, so we do have a quorum. I would remind Senator Adams and Chief Driesbach that when you speak, we need to make sure that your actual video is on if you do speak. That's, I understand to be the open meetings rules for Zoom. So we will stand at ease for a moment while we prepare the microphone for our first presentation.
Hello? Oh, thank you.
Jason, nobody wants to see me.
That's the point.
Understood. Disagree, but that's fine. Mr. Coombs, you ready?
Sure.
Floor is yours.
Okay. So I'm Paul Coombs, if you've forgotten since the last meeting. And we have some fiscal results for you today. We've pretty well mopped up the revenue side of the puzzle, we believe. And I'm just going to give you a high-level summary. I've also you have a handout that I think is 5 or 6 pages that is just the summary. I've also got a 30-something page detailed one here that we can look at as you have questions, okay? If you want to get into some of the details, which knowing you all, you will want to get into the details. So that's good. And then I'll give you a general update on the status on the service side. We're getting really good cooperation from the city agencies. Just, I guess this week, we got a huge dump of all the MetroSafe calls for the last 3 fiscal years, showing fire runs, police runs, EMS runs by block. Matt is our GIS guru up there, and he's told me, I think, 3 million records, 2 million records, millions of records. And so we are aggregating those to different parts of town and be able to tell stories about where the public safety activity is and where those expenditures are going, right? So we also got very good data from Public Works. Of course, you know, they managed garbage inside the urban service district, a few other things out in the county, but then all over the county, they manage roads and streets. And so the street paving is a very big deal. And we have detailed street paving expenditures, budgets for the last 2 or 3 fiscal years by block or from intersection to intersection. So we'll be able to give you a very good allocation of how those dollars are being spent around the county. We also, last week, got very good data from the libraries. They gave us, you know, all of their personnel expenditures by branch, but more interestingly, they gave us the complete dump of all the circulation by people that are patrons of the library. So we're going to have a pretty good service report on that. So now we're after corrections, public health, some of the other agencies. We're sort of just prioritizing them by how big they are in the budget and working down the list. So I think we're on track, you know, to get the revenues cleared up, move through the services over the next 2 months or so. And then it's up to you all to sort of decide what the policy implications are. So today I'm just going to give you a very high level summary of what we've learned on revenues. And then, as I say, if you want to get into details, I've got some details here. So you'll see there's a 6-page handout there. And I've noticed, whoops, what do we got here? The future internet. Okay, we don't need that. So this should be live. There we go. I had this dynamic, but they've turned it into a PDF, so I can't make it come up one at a time. I'll just take you through these bullet points. So recall the objective here is to allocate get the revenue data together and then allocate it by part of the county. Are you?
You keep talking about
Okay. So let me just tell you about the primary pieces of revenue that we're going to talk about today. So we have, of course, occupational taxes, net profits taxes, both for the metro government plus the 4 suburban cities that have an occupational tax. Property taxes, we've got really good detail now on real estate property taxes, personal property taxes, motor vehicle property taxes for all the jurisdictions in the county. We have insurance premiums taxes, which is a very big source of revenue, not only for metro government, but for all of the suburban cities. We have the data on the state road fund money that comes in. We'll talk about that in more detail later if you like, because that's a real bone of contention with people that have been around this for a long time. Jefferson County does not do well on that, but there is tens of millions that do come in from the state revenue sharing formula. And then there's a bunch of charges for different things, parking and water and sewer and TARC and things like that I've included that we can back out as needed. And then a bunch of intergovernmental funds that primarily go to metro government, federal grants, state grants, and I'll summarize that in a minute. So the jurisdictions that we're targeting to sort of allocate this to are what we've been talking about all along: the urban services district, the countywide metro government, the 83 suburban cities, and the unincorporated areas. So those are the 4 geographies that we're going to be talking about today. The data sources that we've been using intensively, you may or may not know about what's called the Uniform Financial Information Reports. I've got one in my hand here. It's about 8 pages long. Every city in Kentucky is supposed to file this every year. It has details on all the revenue sources, all their expenditures. We've been able to get those for almost all the cities. There's, I think, 4 or 5 small suburban cities that didn't file. We don't have that, but I don't think it's going to matter to the big picture. We're going to keep going. It doesn't exist. They didn't file them, and some of them have not filed them for years. So there's no way I can get that data. But it's what was very useful to us in this exercise was it has a consistent way of accounting for all the fiscal activity in the cities, including Metro and then all the suburban cities. So I've relied on that heavily. We've been grinding on this for months, and I'll show you some answers today. Oh, look, we've got it live now. Thank you. Oop, no, it's not. Oh, you're running it? It's okay. You just click as I talk if you don't mind, because it's static here. I've done hundreds of these teaching and giving talks, and I'm just used to running the show, sorry. Other data sources, and I just want to shout out and thanks to some of the agencies. The PVA supplied Matt with all of the real estate records for the whole county, 283,000 real estate records. So we know the assessed value, we know about the homeowners exemptions, we know whether it was residential, industrial, commercial, et cetera. And Matt, again, did his GIS magic and aggregated that stuff to the jurisdictions of interest here. So we know how much real estate taxes have been generated inside the urban service district, how much have been generated by each suburban city, how much have been generated in the unincorporated area, how much have been generated for each of the fire districts. That data is very clean and beautiful. I'm really happy with that data set. Also, the county clerk provided us with the collections on motor vehicle property taxes, which I thought maybe the sheriff had that, but no, if you think about it, when you register your car every year, they collect that property tax. You remember when they give you your new sticker? And so the county clerk had that and had it aggregated by jurisdiction because they have to send the money to the jurisdictions, and they provided that to us. And that was very helpful, particularly with the suburban fire districts. So those are the, oh, and then the Metro Revenue Commission, they collect the occupational tax and the net profits tax for Metro Council. And, you know, we've been tracking that for 2 or 3 decades. And so I've got that data. All right, let me just mention a couple of complexities before we get into sort of results here. You may or may not know that the Revenue Commission that collects the occupational taxes, they don't have the ability to sort that down to the location of the payers. They don't know where employees live that get counted as part of a company's quarterly payment of their occupational taxes. So there's no administrative data there. We've had to use another technique I can get into in a minute if you want. We've modeled it using unemployment insurance data. That's unemployment insurance data, those filings, we know where the person works. We also know where they live. And so we've used that big file to estimate where the occupational taxes are being generated from on a place of residence basis instead of a place of work basis. And on net profits, there's absolutely no data on allocating that to parts of town. You may have one accounting firm file for 8 companies. You may have Walmart filing from Arkansas for 8 stores, you know. So we just used employment distributions to allocate that. If you can come up with a better idea, I'm happy to execute it. And as I mentioned, in the Metro financial report in the UFR, they do show the water company charges, the MSD charges, the TARC charges, and so on. So that's baked in. I'm just being consistent here. We can back it out as you all want for your discussions. I've got the basic data. And then finally, I'll just point out that the results that we're going to show you are based on a mixture of really clean accounting data, like the tax records, plus some things we've had to model. Okay, just a warning there. It's what we have to do. So if you could go to the next slide.
So Paul, if I can interrupt for just a moment.
Yep,
Do you mind taking questions as we go?
of course.
Okay, good. Does anybody have any questions? I had a couple. You went, when you were mentioning, for example, the collections of where the taxes were generated. Were you able to associate those with the residents of the individuals who were where they were employed, for example, where they live versus where they work.
So that's the last slide. That's the punchline today.
So you'll get to that.
Ken Fleming had an idea on the tax committee that I distill this into some kind of matrix, a summary matrix. I mean, you don't really want me to go through the 32 pages, blah, 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 but we've got the details. But all I'm going to show you, or all you have in the handout, is kind of a summary matrix that shows which jurisdiction receives the revenues crossed with where the revenues come from. The jurisdictions of residence, or if it's a business, the location of which jurisdiction the business is located in. So we've made a complete stab at that allocation.
So Paul, you mentioned motor vehicle property taxes, but that's not in the primary revenues. So is that one of the revenue sources that you looked at?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
And then also, is there any way, I don't know if you did, but if you didn't, is there any way for us to determine residences or cities of state taxpayers? I know we're talking about taxes that go to the city, but we're also talking about road funds that come from the state. So it'll be interesting to me to know, where in our city those state tax funds come from, tax payments come from, whether it's this zip code versus that zip code or so forth.
Wow.
I don't know if the Department of Revenue would have something easy they could provide to you.
I've done that study 3 times, and it's a huge deal. It took me almost a year each time to go through all the silos. And we did not get to zip code type information. We did it at the county level.
Okay.
And of course, we know that Jefferson County is subsidizing the rest of the state to the tune, we get back about 50 cents on the dollar what we send over there. If you look at income taxes, sales taxes, property taxes.
I know the number of road fund that we got back in 2015 was about 9%. It's up to about 14% now, which is a good trend. We're about 18% of the population, but I don't know what we are in total numbers of the road fund. I'd like to see, I don't know.
Actually, I did that as part of this. I did the road fund as part of this exercise because it's a big source of revenue for suburban cities.
Okay.
So that, every city gets a piece of the municipal aid map, it's called municipal aid program, and based on their population. And in some, I don't know, Bonnie, how much you get. It's probably not a lot, 50,000, 80,000, 100,000. Some of them, it's maybe 1 million, but it's not a big number. Metro gets, I think, about 20-something million out of that. And I've got, if you want to get into it later, I've got 3 or 4 slides on that that I can pull up that has actually the famous formula of fifths. And I show how it's all driven by county land area and rural population.
We're trying to get that changed. Occupation. I know one of the things about occupational tax, it's where the work was performed. So if I live in Middletown, but I work in J-Town, then I pay it to J-Town, for example.
Yes.
Middletown doesn't have an occupational tax, but I don't pay it to Louisville. I would pay it to J-Town, for example. So we do have that information on where they work. But since I live in Middletown, but not J-Town, is there any way of allocating those dollars in some way to Middletown? So we would know.
We did.
We did.
We did.
Okay, thank you.
And is that the good enough answer? Do you want
It
me
is
to
for
tell
now,
you?
yeah.
I can tell you how we did it. It's pretty complicated, but we did.
Okay.
And it's based upon that unemployment insurance data I mentioned a while ago. So,
That's good enough for me.
okay.
So Paul, is there any source of revenue that you think you did not capture?
Well, I think we've captured all the revenue. I don't know that we've not allocated geographically a lot of the smaller line items inside of metro government, like parking, say, parking fees, parking fines, different kinds of revenue sources like that. I think we're just going to have to assume it's per capita based upon where the population lives in the county. I'm just going for the big stuff, Earl, and trying to give you, an overview and a big picture.
Well, I understand that gets the allocation, but not whether you found the revenue.
Exactly. But yeah, so in a second, I'll show you the total revenues, and it captures everything. And it lines up with the comprehensive annual financial report of Metro Louisville. And then the UFERs, of course, capture everything in the suburban cities. So I think that's all. Obviously, we're not looking at schools. the school. That's a huge piece that we're not looking at. But as far as local government jurisdictions except schools, I think we've got it all.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So I thought just before we look at actual data, I thought it might be worth spending a few minutes talking about institutional questions because, you know, I didn't know all this before we got into this, and I thought I knew a lot about fiscal stuff. And maybe some of you might be interested in a couple of these details. Are you familiar with stacking? So for example, metro government levies an occupational tax countywide of 1.25% on all wages and salaries. But as Jason mentioned, Jeffersontown levies a 1% occupational tax on workers in J-Town. Well, that's added, so they pay both. In fact, if you're a moonlighter and you also work in St. Matthews, you're paying all three of those taxes, so they're stacked. Most of the state doesn't do that. Most of the state, I think, Jason, the threshold's 30,000 county population.
That's right. If a city charges occupational tax, the county does not get it.
They have to give a credit, yeah. So there's one form of stacking, the occupational tax. Another form of stacking, which is you probably are familiar with, is your property tax, say on your home. So if you look at the property tax that you paid on your home back in November, and you look at the line items, you'll see there's a state tax. You'll see there's a metro government tax of about 0.124%. Then if you live in a suburban city, there's a line for that, a tax rate. If you live outside the urban service district, there's a line for your fire and EMS and so on. So these are all stacked. And so we're using that information here to allocate it to residences. Some people think that maybe the urban service district pays this high tax rate and that's all they pay. No, they also pay the county-wide rate. They're stacked. All right, so the second point is the insurance premium taxes. As best I can tell, all suburban cities levy the insurance premium tax on your, basically your homeowner's insurance, personal property, and almost all of them are 5%. That's the most common one. But as I scanned the list, I found there were 15 cities that had rates above 5%. I think one was 12.5%. See if I can remember which one it was. Might have been Prospect. I can't remember.
Shively.
Where?
Shively.
Shively. I think you're right. Shively, 12.5%. And then 38 of them also tax health insurance premiums, which obviously is a big deal. But most do not tax health insurance. Urban Service District does tax health insurance premiums, and that's a big source of revenue for them. The third bullet there I've already talked about. The schools actually collect more taxes in the county than all the other jurisdictions combined. It's just an aha factoid. And there, if you think about it, we all pay, if you live in the county, you all pay an occupational tax to the schools, but you also pay property taxes. And if you look at your property tax bill, say on your house, you'll see that the schools are by far the biggest component of that tax bill. It's like 2/3 or 70%. Then to Jason's point, my next bullet is about the road fund revenues. This is something that probably this committee can come together at the end and say, this is not right. Everybody in the county is being disadvantaged by the state road fund sharing formula. And this has been going, this goes back to 1948 when they were trying, I guess, none of us here are old enough to know, I guess they were trying to pave dirt roads in rural areas because it's, to this day, it's engineered to send the gas tax money back to rural areas. It's based on rural land area, rural population, and rural lane miles, rural road miles. It dominates 4/5 of the 5/5 of the formula. And so all the urban areas in Kentucky have been disadvantaged by this formula for decades. And the more urbanized we get, the more it hurts us all. So if you're complaining that your street isn't paved, or you don't have sidewalks, or you don't have, say, street lighting, or you don't have snow plowing, this is a reason, one of the reasons that, because we're not being taken care of by, now that's a big fight because now you got to take the money away from somebody else. And I've been told that the rural legislators really like this money because they don't generate much in gas taxes, but they greatly benefit by this formula of FIS. Then the last bullet, nobody asked me to look at this, but because I live in a homeowners association, I was aware of it. And I know that in fact, I was treasurer for years. I know that we pay for garbage pickup and street lighting, among other things, and those are the big ones. And those are basically municipal type services. And so I tried to find, there's no database on homeowners associations because they're private organizations. So, but I went to the Board of Realtors, and turns out they had a database of all the transactions over the last year with a flag for whether the property was in a homeowners association, and it listed the name. I counted, there were over 600 homeowners associations in Jefferson County, which shocked me. I thought it would be 100, 150, now some of them are condo associations, but most of them are single-family homes. And I think it's worth thinking about in your puzzle towards the end about policy, maybe for garbage or something like that, that you have a lot of quasi municipalities out there that are doing municipal type things, and it's just done through private dues. In our homeowner association, we pay $425 a year, and a little over half of it is garbage collection, garbage and recycling. Street lighting is a big number too. Little bit of safety. Some of the homeowner associations, you can move up the chain to the Lake Forest of the world or Norton Commons. They're at $1,200 a year, and they have all kinds of services, clubhouse, swimming pool, a lot of landscaping, all kinds of things, and security. Okay, so that's I'm going to go to data now unless you want to talk about this.
Just quickly want to ask a question about that. So for instance, in Douglas Hills, we pay Jefferson County property taxes. We also pay Douglas Hills city taxes. And we pay for those services, garbage lighting, police protection, whatever, for $300 or $400 to Douglas Hills. Is that considered stacking the money that's paid into a city for those services that are not being paid to the county? Does that have any coalition into the, especially when you're talking about a homeowners association, you know, that's a big bulk of what they do that might have been taken care of a city. Does any of that affect any of this as far as what urban service pays versus what a suburban city pays?
So that's the next phase we're going to go into as we get the data on where the services, how much services are being delivered to every part of the county, and what does it cost? And so we can have that conversation about how much you pay in versus what you get out. But we've only got half the puzzle so far, the revenue side. Yeah. So yeah, there's the map. I think I think Matt showed this before when we did the demographic.
Oh, before we move on,
Yes.
I know that we looked at a lot of this and we haven't looked at schools. That's not, I understand that's not between the city and the cities and the county, whatever. But how difficult would it be to get those funding? One of the things that's interesting to me is we have all these services that are provided to our people, including schools. I want to know where the funders are. So what I'd like to know, and I think there are two aspects to funding, maybe three. One is property taxes. I think that would be pretty easy to get. The other one is income taxes that go to the state and then it's put through the SEEK formula. Would that be easy to get? So I would like to know, for example, I grew up in 40214. Where's 40214 versus 40219 versus 40223? How much of the school funding are coming from those areas? Would that be easy to get?
I definitely know how to do it. It's a whole other project, and I don't want to get sidetracked right now with
Okay.
it. But
We'll do that.
so
through
we know how
in a different way.
we know how much income taxes are being generated to the state and sales taxes, and we can
Sales
pretty well
taxes, yeah.
predict it by county. Then you'd have to use some kind of allocation mechanism based upon census data, income, et cetera, throughout the county, zip codes, census tracts, whatever you want to use. It could all be estimated, and then you can follow that back through the SEEK formula on how much comes back to Jefferson County Public Schools. And
Right, and that's the spending part, and that's a different conversation for later on.
Yeah.
But the report today, we're talking about revenues.
yeah,
I'd like to know where those dollars come from.
Yeah,
So I'll talk to you offline and maybe Superintendent Polio, because that's information that I know my citizens would love to know. Thank you.
wow, yeah.
Can I interrupt? I was thinking something along, over here, Paul. I was thinking about that earlier, or I guess, well, earlier. If a household is generating X number of dollars to fund a school, but they have 3 kids, one goes to elementary, middle, and high school, how are those revenues broken out into those areas? That to me would be difficult unless you know of a way, which you probably do.
I mean, it can all be figured out, but you're really getting off subject. We start,
It is.
school's a whole nother issue. I'm happy to meet with you guys and figure it out, but it's a
do it
it's a
offline.
big side project. Yep.
Yeah, I don't understand how frankly, any of that would be relevant to this particular
No.
study or the issue that the General Assembly charged us to investigate.
Thank you. Yeah, that's, yeah.
I do have another question for you. I understand that, there are ways for county residents here to establish separate kind of taxing districts for particular services. Did you find that any of those exist aside from in the form of municipalities or any of the taxing entities that you've discovered, fire, cities?
Well, we've got, there's 8 suburban fire EMS departments out there.
Right,
And-
but you've got, in other words, everything you've got. None of them is just, for example, the residents of Pickett area who decided that they want to establish a taxing zone to deliver those services. The only way that's been done today, to your knowledge, is through homeowners associations. Is that correct?
And municipal governments
Aside from,
and urban service district.
right, aside from governmental
As far
structure.
as I know, those are the only local government jurisdictions we have. Anybody disagree?
No, they are the only ones. That's my question.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
So anyway, I just put the map up to remind you of the geographies we're trying to sort things based on. And you can see the green is the old city of Louisville, former city of Louisville, now the urban service district. The red splotchy things are the suburban cities. The darker shaded ones are the largest population, Jeffersontown, Shively, St. Matthews, et cetera. And then the gray area is what I've been calling the formerly unincorporated. I can't figure out whether it's incorporated or unincorporated. When we did city-county merger, it almost sounds like we incorporated it. It's part of the city, but we still call it unincorporated. I'm still confused on the terminology, but whether it's formally or what, it's unincorporated in what I'm going to show you. Okay, next, please. Thank you. All right, so here's the really, really, really big picture.
One final question. There. Do you know whether or not that population that you just referred to, is that included in the city's population?
Can you back it up, please?
I'm sorry?
If you see the slide, so the suburban cities are 150,000 and the unincorporated's 387.
Right. My question was whether or not the 387, or if that was the number, is that included in the city's count of its population?
Does not include any cities.
No, hold on a second.
No.
Yeah.
Whether whether the population of the unincorporated areas, as you referred to it, is that included in Louisville's total population as they reported?
Oh, now you're, when you say Louisville, you mean Louisville-Jefferson County?
Louisville
What-
Metro.
Louisville Metro, I guess.
I think,
Louisville Metro. So that's the county population, which is 760. I don't know exactly. It's 760, something like that.
I think he's trying to ask, did he separate the urban services district out from, is that what you're talking about, Mr. Jones?
Right. I'm
Yeah, so there,
Yeah.
that is separated out.
When, look,
Correct.
I want to be
let's be careful here.
want to be really clear about this. So when we seek grants from the federal government, the number that we report is the urban services district plus the unincorporated number. That's what we report. That's the Louisville Metro without J-Town and without
Oh,
Middletown and all that. So So the only reason you have separated unincorporated here is because the urban services district pays a different tax than the rest of Louisville. So I live in Owl Creek effectively, which is not in any suburban city. It is an unincorporated area, but it is Louisville, but it's not urban services district. But when we apply for federal grants and the like, my area in Owl Creek is included in Louisville's numbers.
Yes, and Jerry Abramson gave us that little talk at the beginning. He said a lot of these things about trying to convince the Census Bureau that the whole county was the city of Louisville. And they said, no, you have 82 other cities, or 83.
That's right. And when we receive,
You can't have two mayors.
when we receive road funds, for example, or we receive the COVID dollars, I'm talking about from federal government.
Yes.
When we receive COVID dollars, Louisville's number included urban service district and unincorporated. And then Douglas Hills got dollars that were separate. Middletown got dollars that were separate, Prospect and so forth and so on.
That's true.
Okay.
And I think the correct term, help me, Matt, it's Louisville, Jefferson County balance or something is the way the Census Bureau puts it. And so what they mean is the old city of Louisville plus the unincorporated, in other words, everything but the suburban cities. So you're right. And Jerry was talking about a 500,000 threshold that was important to get certain grants. So that's where it becomes important with the federal government. All right. You ready for data? Save the best part for last. So this is really high level. The big column there on the left shows you basically the scope of metro government. And you've got about $2 billion of revenues. You'll see in the notes there that because of their reporting requirements with the state and the feds, they have to put their component units in here, which means MSD, the water company, TARC, and a few other things, but those are the big ones. And it's hundreds of millions of dollars get baked into that. So that's one of the reasons it's so big. But note that the suburban cities, the number is only about 100 million. So the metro government is about 20 times the size as far as revenues go than the combined revenues of all the suburban cities. So it just gives you some context and proportion here. The other thing that's interesting, I didn't realize this, the suburban fire districts now, partly because they've added EMS and they've raised property taxes the past few years, they now get more revenues, those 8 suburban fire districts, than all of the suburban cities combined. A little bit more, I can bet $5 or $10 million more. So those are my ahas on the big picture, and then now we'll go into some weeds.
Could I ask a question about that? So with Louisville Metro government, they count MSD charges
Yeah,
and Louisville water charges. But yet, my people in Douglas Hills pay MSD charges and Louisville water charges. So actually, that revenue comes from the city of Douglas Hills to Louisville Metro, correct?
correct, but the water goes to the residents. It's a fee for service, right?
Right, fee for service,
Yeah,
but it's still counted into,
revenues. Yeah, and if you want to really get into the nitty gritty, which we can, and what you all are, you're not concerned probably most about these countywide services like that. You're probably more concerned about the property taxes, the insurance premium taxes, the occupational taxes, the road fund money. Those are, I think, your 4 biggest things you're worried about. So you can think of it this way. Instead of that big column there of metro revenues being 2 billion, think of it more in terms of the occupational tax generates, including net profits, about 440 million last fiscal year. So that is something that's on the table for you all, 440 million roughly. The property taxes, I'm trying to remember, I've got slides on it, it's 250 million, something like that. The road fund money is 20 million. The insurance premiums money is about 65 million, I think. So you're talking, if you just add those things up, roughly you're talking, I don't know, 6, 7, well, probably more like $800 million of taxes that you guys will be, I think, most focused on here. Not the 2 billion that includes federal grants for public health and roads and all kinds of things.
do you have an apples to apples chart? One that would say that in terms of the revenue, comparable revenue that are available to be collected by, let's say, the suburban cities versus metro government. Do you have anything that shows?
I'm pretty close to what I'll show you next. But I have baked in the charges and the intergovernmental piece. And so I think what you're asking me to do is next time show you, back that out and just show you the pieces of metro government that you're interested in most, not the intergovernmental stuff,
Yeah,
not the component agencies like water and sewer and TARC.
I think it would be a diversion in the discussion
I think so.
to talk about MST, et cetera, unless we are talking about, in your next report, having those services actually now being assumed by those suburban governments. So since that's not being proposed by anybody, I say let's just do apples to apples, right? What is the metro government collecting from residents versus the suburban cities collecting from residents that are the same? So we can understand,
So treat metro government the same way we're treating the suburban cities
yes,
and just lop off the other things.
exactly.
I can do that. It's not, I have all the details. I just have to work it up for you. Yeah.
Dr. Coombs, I think I'm going along the line of Earl there. It's just real confusing when I see revenues for water, sewer and TARC, when they're separate agencies, they do their separate budgeting, et cetera. And I think it does muddy the waters.
So I think there's a little bit of difference. I agree with you totally on water and sewer. That's a fee for service thing. But TARC, I think is a little different because they do have an occupational tax and a net profits tax that everybody pays. And it's a very substantial amount. And I do have that allocated so far. I don't know if you want me to leave it in or out. There has been some discussion in a couple of meetings I've been in about TARC and about whether the revenues that people are paying in certain road corridors are getting bus service. So there may be a mismatch between who's paying for now the fares for TARC are only, I can't remember, about $8.5 million, but their budget is more like $100 million. And they're getting, I've got it in somewhere here, but it's, I'm trying to remember I'll make up a number. It's close to $100 million of occupational taxes and net profits taxes that they're getting. So that are paid by everybody who works in the county, including people who don't live in the county. So if you live in Shepherdsville or, New Albany or whatever, you have to pay, and you work in Jefferson County, you're paying the TARC tax, which is 0.2%.
I understand that, but that's not a metro service. They're still their own
Okay.
agency. They do their own budget. The money flows through the Revenue Commission, but it flows right out. Metro
Mhm.
government doesn't have a say in how they spend it other than going to public meetings and requesting.
I'll chop it up however you all like. The reason I'm presenting it this way is I'm being consistent from the UFA reports that I have for all the cities and for metro government, and it's baked in here, so I'm trying to be consistent. But you've given me permission to do what I want to do anyway and back that stuff out, and I'll give you at least a one-pager next time that summarizes that.
And I think, I brought this up with Dr. Coombs when we met, that it can be misinterpreted that having that $1.5 million on this sheet, and that those items really should be backing out. But I think he wanted to give you, as you said earlier, an overall picture of what's going on. But if you back out the water and the sewers, you're looking at 1.1. Generally speaking, but you include the TARC, and I think that's a valid point because there is discussions on them for some time in terms of new bus routes or discontinuing of bus routes, those sorts of things. So that probably needs to be put into the spectrum because, as you said, there is a property tax or occupational tax associated with that. So
I understand what you want.
Part of what I want is clarification on where the taxes are coming from and where they're going. And I think separating TARC is much better for my interest because we don't have many bus fares where I live, and I assume we're paying a pretty hefty freight portion of it, and I want to know that, and my citizens are entitled to know that. I do want to say for the people who are watching at home or the recording, you mentioned the suburban fire districts are more than suburban cities. And the reason for that, though, is the suburban fire districts in EMS have to cover all of this, all the area outside the urban services district, because fire is not covered by Louisville. And so we need to make sure that everybody who lives outside the USD, including the south end, which don't have any cities, they're paying the fire. So that's the reason that it's so much larger. So it's not, I don't want anybody to go around saying, oh, I'm paying more to my fire than I am to my suburban city. Well, it's totally different. And so, like, for example, again, the people in Middletown are paying 14 cents in addition for every $100 of their property value, because they're getting the fire and the EMS services that are not provided by the city. The city does, on paper, the city provides EMS, but they never make any runs out in the east end or the south end. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
And they're not legally required to do the fire at all.
Yep, no, thank you. That's great clarification.
Dr. Combs, right there at the bottom where it says suburban cities plus Shively, FY20 is because they got their UFR in late.
They've still not filed it. And just so you know, if a city fails to send this to the Kentucky Department of Local Government,
They hold.
they hold your road fund money until you send it in. And I've actually talked to the county clerk and folks in Shively, and they gave me some of the raw data, but they have a CPA who's supposed to send this in and did not. And so I used, because they're so big and so important, I went back and got their fiscal year 20,
Okay.
2020 report and added that to the rest, just so we'd have some coverage.
If you think it will make a whole lot of difference, I will be happy to work with you to find out which those cities are and get them on the ball, because they realize that all of their monies are being held until they get it. I'll be happy to contact those cities for you, or if.
The other 4 or 5 were very small cities. So it's probably
One
not,
of them hadn't been an active city in 6 years, and they got a couple of $100,000 worth of road money sitting there for their city. As soon as they get caught up, they will get that money.
wow. Yeah. Okay, you ready to go to the busiest chart of all? So, as I say, Representative Fleming suggested, I'm not blaming him, I think it's a great idea to try to summarize all of the details that we've been coming up with in some kind of matrix where the rows are the payers and the columns are the recipients of the revenues. And so, I hear from our last discussion, I probably need to come up with a new version of this that strips out all of the MSD water and a lot of the federal grants. And I'll do that. But so I still think there's some very interesting lessons here. And hopefully you think this is a valid way to proceed. So let's just take the first column, and if you'll click again, I've got a note there. Yep. So the first column is the metro government. And you can see there's your 2 billion total at the bottom. So what we've attempted to do here is to allocate all of those revenues to where the payers live. And so what's really clean here are the property taxes, the real estate taxes, the personal taxes, the motor vehicle taxes, the insurance premium taxes. The occupational taxes we've modeled, and that's the biggest single tax number in here. So just as an example, at this point, we're estimating that the residents and other property owners in the suburban cities have generated 288 million of that 2 billion in revenues for metro government. So I think this is the kind of stuff you want to know, and I know you want me to take out these external agencies, but I think at the end of the day, what you're wanting to know is which parts of the county are providing revenues to these different jurisdictions. So that's the way I'm proceeding here. You can see Urban Service District is by itself there. It has basically 2 sources of revenues. it has the property taxes, and it has insurance premium taxes, which generated about 82 million, all paid by taxpayers in the urban service district. So that's why you've got zeros below that. Go to the third column, the suburban cities. There's your almost $100 million in total revenues. And we've estimated how much of that is contributed by these 4 different other jurisdictions. So for example, the 5.4 million contributed by the urban service district, that is how much that people that live in the urban service district pay in occupational taxes to the J-Towns and the St. Matthews and the Shavleys of the world. So we've estimated their contribution to suburban cities' revenues, right? The biggest entry, of course, is the suburban cities themselves. They're generating, that's the, what is that, about $60 million. So about 2/3 of the total are generated by people that own houses and businesses there, are paying property taxes, are paying insurance premium taxes, and occupational taxes to those jurisdictions. The unincorporated contributes a little bit more. And then what's called outside the county. This was going to be a hard one for everybody to digest, but I think it's important to call it out. Remember that something like 28% of the occupational taxes paid to metro government are paid by people who do not live in Jefferson County. And we are the central workplace for a 10 or 15 county region. So the Bullitt counties and the Oldham counties, right? And Shelby County and Clark County and Floyd County, et cetera, are sending tens of thousands of workers here in here every day. They're paying the occupational taxes and the TARC tax to metro government, and then they live somewhere else. So that's buried in that number, that outside the county number, along with federal state grants that go to the jurisdictions. Unincorporated is a big blank because it's not a jurisdiction. It doesn't receive any revenues, right? Now, so we're going to see later, it gets some services, but it doesn't get any revenues because it's not a local government jurisdiction. Then the last column are the suburban fire districts and EMS departments. And so we've estimated how much in property taxes. For example, if you look at that 33 million that suburban cities pay to fire districts, that's kind of what we were talking about 10 minutes ago. So if you live in St. Matthews, you pay your St. Matthews property tax, but then you pay an extra property tax to the St. Matthews / something fire district. And that's a big number. I've got the details if you want to see it. And then the unincorporated 72 million. That, and that's back to our recent discussion, that's all of the property owners outside of the urban service district pay to these suburban fire districts, just as you were saying a while ago, Jason. So, and that's a huge number. And that, I think these numbers are very accurate because it's based upon the street address of the property owner and the assessed value of their property. And so we know which fire district they're in and what their assessment is, and we've applied the correct tax rates, and we come up with $72 million to fund, and which is, what is that, about, well, a little over 70% of the fire district's budget.
And that's fully appropriate because like I'm in that category. We're getting those services for fire EMS that we're paying for there. I would note that the outside the county number, that is completely from Representative Fleming's district because there's a Anchorage Middletown Fire also has a number of precincts in Oldham County that is in their jurisdiction and has been in their jurisdiction for decades and decades. So that's the Orchard Grass, Ken, Orchard Hills. Yeah, so that's that area. That's the reason that there's out of county money coming to the fire and EMS.
Actually, that's part of the reason. It turns out that the fire districts take Anchorage, Middletown. So they levy the property taxes, right? Real, personal, motor vehicle. But if you look at their financial reports, you'll see they also get state grants. And I off the top of my head, I can't remember, I got it here somewhere, but And so most of that money, that 2.2 million, is actually state grants that the fire departments got in fiscal 21. The basis of those grants, I don't know, but maybe it was COVID, I don't know, but it's in their financial reports, grants from the state of Kentucky. Some were like 200,000, some were 500,000. There were substantial grants. Yep. And unfortunately, I only have 4 of the 8 that that filed financial reports. So that number will grow if I can find the rest of them.
Can you somehow note that or annotate that?
Sure,
Your data?
sure. And actually, Earl, the notes are in the 31-page thing that I didn't want to drag you through because it's even more nerdy than all this, but,
And we have the chief, Driesbach, who is the representative from Fire and EMS. I would ask Chief. I would ask if he could, and he's on. I don't know why I'm double there. I would ask if he would get the other 4 jurisdictions to provide information.
I actually have, we got an echo.
Mute, Sean.
That's all I have.
Sean, raise your hand if you want to speak, because I think we've muted you. Okay. All right, so we'll unmute you, but if you're listening on 2 devices, I think there's going to be an echo. But I think, is he unmuted now? Okay, you can unmute yourself, Chief.
Yeah, I'd be happy to get that information for you for the other 4 districts that did not submit. So that won't be a problem.
Thanks, Chief.
So actually, it's a little more complicated. So we really do have all of their property tax receipts because I got that from the sheriff's office. What we don't have are these uniform financial reports that they send to Department of Local Government. I did an open records request. They're not on the Department of Local Government's website. There's a place for them, but they're not there. I did an open records request and they told me they didn't have them. I went to the fire districts and they said, oh, we sent them. So the problem is at the state level of not publishing them.
Something tells me the chief can get them to send to you directly.
Yeah, I have 4. Yep.
Which ones are missing?
You're getting real property taxes from PBA, but are you getting also the tangible tax that we received too?
Yes. So I've got the sheriff has, as you know, what's called a settlement report that shows the amount collected on real and personal property for every jurisdiction in the county. And they have to file the final settlement report and then they wire you the money. So it's the bottom line number that you get. So I have all the property tax receipts for all 8 jurisdictions, no problem. It's just there's some other lines there that I saw on the financial statements that I did get where there was intergovernmental revenues that, we'd like to include. So thank you. I'll send you an email. I know how to reach you.
Sure. And I'll reach out to all the chiefs. We have another chiefs meeting in May and I'll make sure all that's gathered before you.
Actually, I sent them all letters about a month ago and I received 4, but I didn't receive 4.
Chief, your source of grants, things like federal, state, to the buy equipment, what kind of awarding as far as grants go do you guys get?
Just what you said, Mayor, we get grants for apparatus, radios, other equipment. We got some grants during COVID to help offset some of the EMS costs and lack of medical runs, et cetera. So just a little bit of everything. We also did get some of the premium pay. That won't be in those particular Buford reports because that won't be until next year. But it's a little of everything that we get when it comes to grants. But the 2.2 million is when you look at apparatus. I mean, one apparatus could have cost $1 million. So it doesn't get very spread out to other departments other than maybe very small amounts of money. But That's what the grants are for. They're for apparatus and equipment, et cetera. Some of them did get some safer grants. The safer grants are for personnel. So I'm not sure if any departments were working in safer grants last year, but it's very possible it could be a safer grant, which is actually for personnel.
Okay, Dr. Coombs, that concludes your report.
Yes.
I
Does the tax committee have any comments or observations?
just want to ask Dr. Coombs, on that last slide, number 6, on the urban services, there's 82 million. That represents real property, personal bank deposits, life insurance, and group insurance, correct?
Which number are we focusing on?
We're looking at 82 million under urban services district.
Oh, sure. Yes.
And that includes that, correct?
That's all it includes. It includes the property tax and the insurance premiums tax receipts for urban service district.
Right. So what does that go to pay for?
It goes for only, I think it's 3 things. Correct me if I'm wrong. Chakori knows this better than me. It's, so it's fire department, it's garbage pickup, and it's street lighting.
Okay, do you,
Correct? I think it's just 3 things. And this was the deal that was cut at merger, that the old city of Louisville would form an urban service district. It would have a special property tax rate and keep the insurance premiums for that area. And in return, that money was dedicated to the old city of Louisville residents and businesses to pay for garbage pickup, fire, and street lighting. Obviously, the police is countywide.
right? And the detail slides, I think you have on number 30
Oh,
of looking at the expenditures.
they don't have that. I
You
can
don't have
show it.
He's had to bring it up.
It's, ma'am, can you give me the big slideshow? I don't know if I can turn this off or not. Let's see. I can't control this. Yeah, I want to go to the last page of or the second to last page of the 30 page.
The 30.
This, keyboard do what? Oh, escape. Ah, thank you, thank you. All right, so we go to the big one. I'll do it. Thank you. I can do that. I know about, no, it's not right behind it. Maybe it is. No, it's not. It's okay. I know how to do it here. This is this is the big one. And I'll just scroll down here this is what Ken is looking at. Now, this is the way I interpret data that I got from Metro on urban service district revenues and expenditures. So you see the top is basically the 2 revenue sources, property taxes and then the insurance premiums taxes, which add up to 82.6 million. So that's where we got the number in our matrix, right? Then they gave me an estimate of the expenditures. There's your fire department, 71 million. I think there's 4 different fire districts, fire departments inside the old city of Louisville, and their expenditures were 71 million. Solid waste, well, that's garbage, right? So that's 20 million. And then streetlights, 5.2. Add that up, it's 96, 97 million. And as best I can tell, the difference is made up by the general fund of Metro government. I've got a call in to confirm that, but that's the way I read it.
Dr. Coombs, do you know when they're talking about the fire department? I know that Louisville Fire has the only arson investigation for all of Metro. So are they backing out the arson investigation that's in there? Because that's roughly about a $7-8 million department, because they do it countywide and they don't charge the other ones.
I saw mention of that, but I've not gone in the weeds to account for it. So thank you.
I mean,
I will.
It's a big chunk.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is with solid waste management services, I know that when there's illegal dumping, they pick up all over the community. They don't say, oh, it's only urban service district and that's that equipment. So I'm wondering if they've been able to keep that aside, because I know Metro, when I was there, used to spend about 4 or 5 million a year just in illegal dumps.
I want to,
I actually think it's premature to even, this is expense data and we're not there yet. And I put it in here because I had the revenues and I wanted to show people what I had from Urban Service District. But I'd prefer to delay this discussion a month or so till we get into all the service and expenditures and I have time to get in the weeds. I've seen mention of that arson thing and I did, let's see, yeah, so this would be Jeff Brown he told me about some of this, but I've not made any adjustments yet. So thank you.
Thanks.
I may be confused, Mary Ann. I thought that the 109 board was the one that, because they're always talking about in Public Works, whenever there's illegal dumping or whatever, the 109 board does not.
109 board doesn't have any money.
Well,
They don't have any staff. They don't have anyone that goes out and picks that stuff up. It's Public Works that does it.
okay, well, I guess that's part of my confusion and why I feel like some of the stuff is being intertwined, because the 109 board is supposed to be a separate entity, yet they're always touting about the fact that they are the ones that's going out and taking care of the illegal dumping and bright side and things like that. So I think that's part of what we're trying to find out is who's reaping the benefit and who is paying for that in something like that. Because I've been in those 109 board meetings and they're the ones that'll take the credit for it.
We're getting ahead of ourselves on
But
the
I
expenditure
understand what
side.
you're saying.
And, but I appreciate the caveats and I'll catch that as we process the service data.
Yeah, I mean, I would hope that members of the commission, if they have information they think would be relevant to the next phase of the study, they basically just contact Dr. Coombs with that information so that he can follow up and he either has it or he knows about it or he finds out about it and he includes it.
Yep.
I think we had-
That's the goal.
I know you want to delay the conversation. I just want everyone to know we are meeting with Councilman Piagentini later this month to talk through those services and really get into some of the dirty details. Another example is some suburban cities have police, some do not.
Yep.
But even the ones that do have police, they send homicide cases to LMPD. So how are we accounting for those services that are provided that we might not think about? I'm curious if you still plan to look for income data based on address or just smaller geographies at all? Or is it just, it's impossible and you can't even do that?
Well, actually, Matt Ruther presented that last time. He showed median household income. I can't remember what else was in that slide deck you gave last time, but he had Census Bureau data broken out by these different jurisdictions. Obviously, we have it, down to the census tract level. So talk to us about what you want us to do. And
But it can't get any smaller than that? I remember one time we talked about parcels.
oh, no, you can't get income data but you can get neighborhoods. Matt, a census tract is what, 4,000 people, 2,000 households. That's the most reliable disaggregation you're going to get, which is pretty small. And that's pretty good. It's neighborhood.
So a question about that method. I'm curious if your team is concerned about it being a little contradictory, because when we look at expenditures, we're looking at where people provide services, where people respond to 911 calls, where the paving gets done, where the trash is picked up. We're not looking at the headquarters of the agency, but when we look at income as a revenue, we're talking about where people live as opposed to where they provide their service and where they work.
Yep.
And I would argue they're not going to be making those high incomes if they worked where they lived. Those are two very different narratives, and I'm concerned that we're contradicting ourselves as we paint that picture.
Yeah, those are great points, and you all are going to have to struggle with all that. All I can do is provide you with the basic data, and you're going to have to make those judgment calls. And if we can measure it, we'll measure it. But there's a lot of things we can't measure. And for example, you could say corrections, for example, it serves the whole community and provides a great benefit to whether you have anybody committing crimes or not. It's public health, same thing. It's a community-wide service. Now, how do you allocate the benefits to somebody who never takes advantage of it? So this is not like an accounting audit.
Right. And last question, it should be pretty quick. I know you listed some agencies you're still waiting on to get information from. If you had to throw a percentage on it, how close are you to getting all expenditures from metro government agencies?
Well, the Metro Safe, because it's fire, EMS, and police, plus Public Works, which is garbage and street paving, plus libraries, I'm sure we're over half of the expenditures. Metro Safe is the biggest. The corrections is the next biggest one that we don't have, and we're working on that. Unfortunately, David James told me that they only keep paper records of incarceration. And so, I was expecting this big digital file that we could analyze. So we're going to, Matt and I have been talking about it. There's no way we're going to go over there and scan thousands of, we're going to come up with some kind of random sampling method, I guess, of paper records to try to allocate it geographically.
I'm sorry, just one more thing on that because you brought it up.
Like a lawyer, Jacory, one more question.
I'm done after this.
Okay, he's got great questions.
You should push back on that because they've been working on a dashboard to really understand what our population of people who are in prison.
Yeah.
They've been working on a dashboard for, it seems like, years, and we haven't gotten that yet. So that dashboard should have data in it that talks about where people lived prior to going into corrections. Thank you.
If I could, I would ask whoever we don't get information from, could you let us know in advance? Because I'd like to ask them to come to the chair that you're sitting at, ask them why they don't have that information. I'd also ask, I'm thankful that my friend, Mr. Kaplan, is here because on paper, or as Councilman Arthur said, let's make sure that corrections gives us the information that we need. But I also want to make sure to highlight this, and I know it's preliminary, so we're not relying on this information because it's not completely, because it's not full, and it has to have a lot of caveats, but that USD number is extremely important that we get right. And I wanted to note that my friend, Councilman Arthur, when he mentions police and homicide, that's not in this, because that's police, which we all paid for separately, so that's not this. But that number right there is important to me because we don't get any of those services. So I want to make sure that if we're subsidizing by 14 million or 7 million or 21 million, I know what that is. And I know the caveat. So if there's a caveat, we have arson investigators. Okay, fine. How much does it cost? We also need to know, because I know that my fire goes into the urban services district and it doesn't come the other way. It goes very, very minimal, but we go in there a lot. And our EMS. So that also needs to be in the subsidization number. So I want to know what the number is and what the provisos are, so people from all sides can make their arguments. But I can go to my citizens and say, look, we don't subsidize them, or yes, we do, and I'm doing something about it. So this is a very important number that we're going to be having lots of fights over. So let's do it in daylight, and everybody has the information that they need and can make their own arguments. But this is a massively important number. Thank you.
Probably should not even have put it in the slide deck because it has expenses in it and we wanted to delay that. But, you know, shame on me. So anyway, well, it teed up where we're going and you gave me great feedback for, you know, what we have to work on. So
I promise I won't say another word. Right? He brought it up. So Urban Services District, and I don't even know how to ask this question. You know, some council members have sponsored lights in the Urban Services District, but it's for a 5-year lease. And when that's up, it's kind of up in the air who picks up that expense. So I'm just curious, as you dig into that number anymore with any more detail, how do we account for revenues?
you, Corey, you're saying that council members in the urban service district have used their own funds to fund streetlights?
Yes.
I heard also that Councilman Peden did the same thing. So it's happening around the county, I guess.
Right. Well, and in some cases, those council districts that have home ownership associations, they might pick up the cost after the 5-year lease. But in the urban services district, where we largely don't have homeowner, associations, who picks that up at the end? Does it go into their budget? I just don't understand what that relationship looks like. And in some cases, we're talking about council members who are no longer here, who paid for lights. Are those lights just dark right now? And if people call and say, turn this back on, are they keeping track of that was an expense that the council member paid for versus the people in the urban services district? So a lot of question marks about that.
So given that there's USD is spending 5.2 million now on streetlights, where are they funding streetlights? In other words, the urban service district doesn't have full streetlights? That's what you're saying, that there's areas of the urban service district that are not covered by the city, and therefore the council members have to put up their own money?
That's the question.
Okay, I'll write it down.
Well, is it a question that it's not covered or that maybe it simply hasn't been planned for in that particular area or location yet? And therefore the members have picked up the expense. In any event, I guess I have a question. How would you don't have the fund, you're not tracking the funds that come out of the council members' budget, or are you?
I don't want to, but I've heard these stories. I heard about Councilmember Peden. I think there was maybe a dangerous intersection or something in his district, and he came up with some of his own emergency funds or whatever you call it, his discretionary money to pay for lights there. And so now you're saying it's also in the urban service district.
Yeah, I mean, there's a council member who's actually in the administration now who paid $75,000 of council funds for lights in her district.
Yep.
And once that 5 years is up, then what? So I'm just curious about that. Thank you.
Okay, I'll dig into it.
Any other questions or comments?
So,
Yes.
I did do lighting along Dixie Highway, South Dixie, where there were so many bad accidents. So I'm hoping that, whoever comes in behind me will pick up that cost, It was just a 5-year deal.
Well, it seems as if we've discovered an unanticipated gap. It's
Well-
inside the UST as opposed to outside.
Could be.
Liz, Cindy?
Basically outside the US.
Oh, I see, okay.
We'll wrangle over that number, I'm sure.
Any other questions? Any other comments? So, Paul, I don't know whether you said your estimate about the timing on providing your next report on expenditures. What was
So-
your estimate?
So we'll do a little revision on the revenues, tighten that up a little bit, show you a new matrix, strip out the water company, MSD, et cetera, tighten that up, a little more footnotes. And then it's really how fast, Matt is already grinding on this, but we have not really analyzed the MetroSafe data. We're just trying to do the GIS work now. Then once that's done, then we've got to make sense of it. So hopefully in a month, we'll have some stories about police runs, fire runs, EMS runs by jurisdiction, that we can use to allocate the MetroSafe budget. And then also street paving and libraries. We've already got libraries. So I'm hoping we can have those three summarized for you by next meeting. And then we'll go on to the next chunk and hopefully be close to the end by then, and y'all can start doing your policy debates. And you might want to bring in to this chair some of the heads of these agencies to fill in the nuances about snow plowing. And Jeff Brown at Public Works was explaining to me the difference between county roads, streets in suburban districts, state roads, federal roads. I think interstate highways and federal roads, interstate highways would be street lighting, would be paid for by federal funds. State roads, paving would be paid for by state. See, it's pretty complicated.
Right.
And he lives it every day, and it can explain
Who was
that
that
a lot
again?
better than me.
Who is that you're referring to?
Jeff Brown, he's the head of Public Works.
I see. Yeah, I mean, I think that is something we'll be looking to do. I mean, obviously, we don't have that information, so clearly it'll have to come from the people who are in charge of those departments and those services.
And the gentleman who's in charge of the state roads in the 8th district, I think it's Matt Bullock. He might be somebody who could be with him. 5th district, thank you. I'm thinking my police district, thank you.
Also,
We don't have enough police in.
Jeff Brown could also answer Marianne's questions about the junk hauling and what was the other one? The illegal dumping and arson. So that's under him, and he could explain how this is. But between now and then, I'll try to roll the numbers up for you, and then he can give you the nuances.
Right, what I was trying to figure out is whether or not that kind of testimony, if you will, where it would come in relationship to the report that you're generating. Would it come before or after, particularly given the time we've got left to September? So I think we should consider.
I would recommend that you bring some agency heads in as I present the expenditure data. Matt will be with me on that, and have them here to answer questions. And then we can sort of check that box.
Yeah.
Now we understand MetroSafe, right? And move on, as opposed to kicking the can to the next meeting. There's no way you're going to account for every penny in this exercise. It's just too complicated. There's too many agencies. There's too little data, et cetera. So just going to have to do the best you can.
Any other comments? I guess I've been hoping, by the way, that with the information you're providing on services, that'll also help the folks who are looking at gaps to be able to see now the difference between the two reports and be able to sort of hone in then on either, as we have been calling it, the perceived and the real gaps.
Yes, yes. I met with Scott's committee a few weeks ago, and now I finally understand what that meant about soft and hard.
Yep.
So hard is what the data show us, and soft is what people perceive, which may be different than the facts. So, yeah, that's where we're going.
If there's nothing else, we can adjourn. Okay, great. Thank you all.
Thank you. Okay.